Good morning, grade 11s. So for the rest of the week, we will still focus on the topic of measurement. And we'll start with calculating perimeter, and later in the week, we'll look at calculating area and total surface area. So let's get started. This is on page 111 to page 113 in your answer series textbooks. So what is perimeter? A perimeter is the border or outer boundary lengths of a 2D figure. In a circle, the perimeter will be referred to as the circumference, and the units are typically given in millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. So what does the perimeter of a square look like, and how do we calculate this? So you'll see a square has 4 sides which are equal in length. The angles of the sides meet at a 90-degree angle, and therefore the formula will be given as 4 times the side. Just before we move on, I just want to mention that the formula will be given to you in tests. Let's take a look at an example. You have a square with one dimension given as 3 centimeters, and that's all they really have to give you because we know a square has sides that are equal in length. So we just take 4 times 3, and that gives us a total perimeter of 12 centimeters. At a rectangle, so a rectangle is slightly different, where there are opposite sides, or the opposite sides are equal in length, and they also meet each other at 90-degree angles. So to get the perimeter, we take 2 times the length plus 2 times the breadth. It's also represented as 2L plus 2B, or we can say 2 times length plus breadth. Looking at the example, they give us a rectangle with dimensions of 5 millimeters by 2 millimeters. So we just take those values and substitute them into the formula, and we'll see 2 times 5 plus 2 times 2 equals a perimeter of 14 millimeters. Calculating the perimeter of a triangle, we know that we need the value of 3 sides because a triangle typically has 3 sides, but we also have various types of triangles. So let's look at a scalene. You'll see that a scalene is a triangle where all sides are different in length. So the standard formula to calculate the perimeter of a triangle will always be A plus B plus C, just adding up the 3 sides together. So in the case of a scalene, we will have to know the values of all 3 sides, and we will add them together, substitute it into the formula. 6 plus 10 plus 2 equals 18 millimeters. If we take a look at isosceles, their characteristics are a little different, where 2 of the sides are equal in length. However, the formula typically is still side 1 plus side 2 plus side 3, but in this case, we know that 2 of the sides are equal, so we can represent it as A plus B. So in an example, we only have to give you 2 dimensions, or 2 lengths. Therefore, we can substitute that into the formula. We know that if we add 4 and 8 together, it will give us 16 centimeters, or we could say 2 times 4 plus 8, since the 2 sides there are equal to one another. When we look at the perimeter of a right triangle, you'll see that 2 of the sides meet at 90-degree angles, and the side opposite this 90-degree angle you'll see is called the hypotenuse. So typically, again, we'll have to have the value of all 3 sides, add them together, and we'll find the perimeter. Just take note that when one of the sides are unknown, we will have to make use of the theorem of Pythagoras. So this is given as the hypotenuse squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. Now let's take a look at an example. They've given us a right triangle with a height of 9 meters and a base there of 12 meters. However, the hypotenuse is unknown, and we need all three sides to calculate the perimeter. So let's make use of the theorem of Pythagoras. Remember, these formulas will be given to you. So the hypotenuse squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. So 9 squared, which is the same as saying 9 times 9, plus 12 squared, which is the same as saying 12 times 12, equals 225 meters. However, this is not the length of the hypotenuse because we need to first find the square root of our answer, and that will give us the actual length of the side. So just to remember to get the square root of your answer, and that will give you the value of the hypotenuse. So now that we have all these values, we can simply add them together and you'll find your perimeter. In this case is 36 meters. Okay, so how do we calculate the circumference of a circle? First, just let's take a look at some circle terminology. So you'll see we have something we call the radius, which extends from the center of the circle to the circumference. And then the center, which is the middle point of the circle, and the diameter, which extends from the one side of the circle that goes through the center and extends to the other side. So you'll find that the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. Or we could also say the radius is the diameter divided by 2. And then we find the circumference, which is that outer boundary of the circle, which makes the shape of a circle. So how do we calculate the circumference of a full circle? So we want to find the value of the outer boundary, and for that we need the radius or the diameter. So the standard formula are given as the circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius, or you can use the formula the circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. Very important to remember is that we will be using the approximate value of pi as 3,142. Please do not use the pi button on your calculators. This is just to standardize our answers. Now, if we look at the example, they give us a circle with a radius of 8 millimeters. So which formula will we use? It will be easier to use the first formula given there, as we will take 2 times pi times the radius. So we just substitute the value of pi and the radius in the formula, and it gives us a circumference of 50,27 millimeters. However, if they give us the value of the diameter, it'll be easier to use the second formula given on the right side there. So we substitute the value of pi and the diameter into the formula, and that gives us the value as 69,12 meters. And that's the value of the circumference. You can still use the first formula. Just remember to convert the diameter to a radius by dividing the diameter by 2 if you make use of the first formula you see there on top. How do we calculate the circumference of a semicircle? So this is, in fact, half of a circle. So we want half of the circumference of a full circle plus the diameter. So the formula is given as follows. So it looks very complicated, but it's actually very simple. So the circumference equals the circumference of a full circle multiplied by a half, because you see it's a semicircle, so we only want half of the circumference of that circle plus the remaining side there, which is the value of the diameter. So a half times 2 times pi times radius, and then we just add the diameter at the end. But this is just saying get the circumference of a full circle, divide that by 2, and then add the diameter, and we'll find the value of the circumference. So in an example, they only have to give us the value of the diameter, or they could give us the value of a radius, but we would just then have to multiply the radius by 2. So in this example, the diameter is 14 centimeters. All we have to do is substitute the values into the formula, but like I just mentioned before, the formula says a half times 2 times pi times the radius plus the diameter. But what is the radius? The radius was not given on the actual semicircle there, and we can easily calculate that radius by just dividing the diameter by 2. So you'll see I've substituted 7 there in the place of the radius in red. So the total value of this circumference equals 35,99 centimeters. Calculating the circumference of a quarter is quite similar as that for a semicircle. So we want to get the outer boundary there. That part highlighted in green represents the portion of the circle's circumference that we want to calculate, and the area, or the red lines there, represent the radius. So if we take a look at the formula, you'll see the circumference equals a quarter times 2 times pi times the radius plus 2 times the radius. So what is this saying? It says that we have to divide the circumference of a full circle by 4, and that's represented in the formula there that's highlighted in green. Remember when we just did the semicircle, it was a half times the circumference of a full circle. But because we are looking at a quarter, now we just multiply with a quarter. So a quarter times the circumference of a full circle plus 2 times the radius. In the example, quarter with a radius of 3 millimeters. So what we do is we substitute that into the formula. A quarter times 2 times 3,142 times 3, which is the radius, plus 2 times 3. That gives us 4,713 plus 6, and the total is given as 10,71 millimeters. Finally, how do we calculate the circumference of 3/4 of a circle? So again, the red lines is representing the radius, and the green line represents 3/4 of the circumference of a full circle. So again, the formula looks very similar than the previous one, except this time we want 3/4 of the value of a full circle's circumference plus 2 times the radius. So the formula is given as 3/4 times 2 times pi times the radius plus 2 times the radius again. In an example, the radius is given as 4 meters. So if we substitute that value, 3/4 times 2 times 3,142 times 4, which is the radius, plus 2 times 4, gives us 18,852 plus 8, and then rounded off to 2 decimal places, 26,85 meters. To remember, when you are working with perimeter, break the complex shapes down into its basic shapes, such as squares, rectangles, triangles, and circles, especially when it comes to complex shapes. Remember that we will only add the outermost length of the shape or the outer boundary. So therefore, the formulae for perimeter for the basic shapes may not always be applicable, especially if you are looking at some funny shapes or complex shapes. Very, very important. Make sure that all the measurements are in the same units. For example, millimeters or meters or centimeters. Otherwise, your answer will be very inaccurate. You must, if they give you dimensions which are in different units, make sure to convert them all into the most appropriate unit, but the same unit. Round off your final answers to 2 decimal places unless otherwise stated. And remember that in the case of products that are sold in terms of length, they will be sold per whole meter or meter squared or cubic meters. So you have to round up your answers when calculating costs. So let's take a look at this worked example on page 112. They've given us a semi-complex shape because it's neither a rectangle or a triangle. So we'll have to break it up into basic shapes. However, they've made a mistake with the answer in your textbook. They've given the breadth as 6 meters where it should be 6 centimeters. And they've given the length there as 7 meters where it should be 7 centimeters. Okay, so as you can see, all my units on this shape is the same. So we will work with centimeters. So what is it that we want to calculate? We just want to calculate that the outer border or the outer boundary of this shape. Now you'll see that sometimes they won't give you all the dimensions. So let's say I have left out the value of 2 of these dimensions. Now how would we calculate that? Now, so for the first value there, let's calculate the missing value there on that horizontal plane there. So if we take 7 centimeters, if you take the length of the shape and you subtract what has already been given, you'll see that at the top there it's 1 centimeter in the middle, the length, and the length at the very top is 2 centimeters. But the total length of this shape is 7 centimeters at the bottom. So therefore that missing unit should be equal to 4 centimeters. And the same goes for the other missing unit. The breadth of the shape is 6 centimeters, and you'll see they deduct 3 centimeters from 6 as well as 2 to get the answer of the remaining 1 centimeter. You'll see where we got this is it's there circled in green, 2 centimeters, which is the breadth of the shape at the top, and 3 centimeters is the breadth given there in the middle. So, but the total breadth is 6 centimeters. So therefore, the final length there at the very bottom, at the bottom right corner, that has to be equal to 1 centimeter. So now when we have all the lengths required, we will just add up all 8 of these figures, which is 7 plus 6 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3 plus 4 plus 1. This is all in centimeters, so we don't have to convert anything. So the total or the final answer is 26 centimeters. If we look at this question, and during the Oyster Festival, Knysna High School will be hiring out its field to be used for parking. How much chevron tape will be needed to demarcate the parking area? So what is it that we need to calculate? What does the boundary look like? So this looks like a fairly complex shape, but we can break this down into a rectangle and a triangle. But you'll see that that 25-meter dotted line within the parking area doesn't form part of the boundary. So you'll see that that is a right angle or right triangle given there. So there is a missing hypotenuse angle side there. So you would first have to calculate that and then add all the lengths together at the end. So again, the formula for the hypotenuse squared equals side 1 squared plus side 2 squared, which is the theorem of Pythagoras. So that gives you 650 meters, but remember you need to get the square root of your answer to get the actual distance. And this is given as 25,50 meters. So now that we have all of our lengths, we can just add them together to find the number of meters of chevron tape that we need. Take a look at the last example on page 113. So here in question 3, they say the back wall of a church has a round circular stained glass window pane. In order to ensure that the window pane is tightly secured, a rubber seal needs to be fitted around the edge of the circular window pane. Calculate the length of the rubber seal that is needed. Round it off to the nearest purchasing meter. So we would most likely have to round up at the end. So what they want is the circumference of the window. Right, so this is a basic shape, so we can just use the formula for the circumference of a full circle. And what do I need to calculate the circumference of a full circle? Remember that the formula was given as 2 times pi times the radius, or you can use the formula as pi times the diameter. Now, what did they give us? In the example, they gave us the diameter of 3 meters, but you can easily convert that to a radius by dividing that by 2. So if I use the radius instead of the diameter, I would have 2 times 3,142 times 1,5, which is the half of 3, and that's equal to a circumference of 9,43 meters. Or you could do the same calculation by using the other formula, and you will get 9,43 as well. So it doesn't really matter which formula you use. However, remember that we need to round up to the nearest purchasing meter. So 9,43 meters means we need to round up to 10 meters if we want to have enough to cover this. All right, that's the end of the worked example. This is exercise 1 that you need to complete. Here's question 1. Feel free to pause the video now if you don't have your answer series textbook with you at the moment. So you can pause this and answer the question and then play. Here is question 2. And then you have question 3, which is the last question. Right, so that was the calculation of perimeter. That's all we have for you today. I'll see you tomorrow for the calculation of area. And when you are finished with this exercise, you will find the memo on A23 at the back of your answer series textbooks. Okay, grade 11s, I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for your time. Goodbye.